Europe's far right is turning against Trump, and it changes everything. Why even Europe's nationalist admirers are stepping back from Donald Trump. For a decade, Europe's nationalist leaders treated Donald Trump like an ally, a partner, even a political model. Now they're walking away. From London to Berlin to Rome, politicians who once praised America first are suddenly saying something quite different. We are not America's lapdog. So, what changed, and why is the transatlantic right starting to split apart? For a decade, Europe's nationalist right imagined Donald Trump as a transatlantic ally in a shared struggle, against migration, against liberal technocracy, and against what they saw as the suffocating norms of post-war multilateralism. Today that imagined alliance is fraying. The rupture has not come from Brussels. It came from Washington. The catalyst is war. Donald Trump's decision to escalate military confrontation with Iran, and his subsequent demand that European states help police the Strait of Hormuz, has exposed a structural contradiction at the heart of the transatlantic populist project. Europe's far-right parties may admire America's strength, but they do not wish to subordinate their sovereignty to it. Several NATO countries swiftly rejected Washington's request for naval deployments, with leaders bluntly insisting the conflict was not our war. That refusal marks something larger than a tactical disagreement. It signals the end of the illusion that America first could ever be compatible with Europe first. From ideological kinship to strategic divergence, for years, Trumpism offered Europe's nationalist movements a template. It showed that insurgent politics could capture the state. It promised protection against liberal globalization. And it legitimized rhetoric that had once been confined to the fringes. Washington reciprocated. American institutions cultivated relationships with European right-wing parties through think tanks, civil society grants and ideological networking around immigration controls and free speech campaigns. A transatlantic populist ecosystem began to take shape. Yet this alliance always contained a paradox. Trump's foreign policy was never nationalist in the European sense. It was imperial in the American one. Tariffs on European exports, threats against Denmark over Greenland, and unilateral military interventions were not aberrations. They were expressions of a worldview in which allies exist to serve American leverage rather than share power. Even before the Iran conflict, these tensions had begun eroding trust across the Atlantic. The war has merely accelerated the process. The Iran shock, European reluctance to join the campaign against Iran reflects more than pacifism. It reflects exposure. Unlike the United States, Europe sits within range of missile escalation and energy disruption. The conflict has already threatened shipping lanes and triggered fears of a second continental energy crisis as Hormuz instability pushed gas prices sharply higher. European governments therefore see risk where Washington sees leverage, even among the continent's nationalist right, normally sympathetic to Israel and hostile to Tehran. Trump's strategy appears dangerously open-ended. Research suggests divisions are widening inside the transatlantic far-right itself, with leaders in France, Germany, and Italy increasingly uneasy about being drawn into American-led conflicts that contradict their domestic priorities. In short, admiration has collided with geography. Public opinion closes the door. Politicians follow voters. And voters across Europe are moving away from Trump. Polling across Britain, Germany and France shows limited support for American military escalation. Only minorities endorse strikes on Iran. In Britain especially, anti-Trump sentiment has hardened into something close to consensus. This creates a dilemma for nationalist parties that once embraced him. To win office, they must appeal beyond their activist base. That electorate increasingly regards Trump not as a model, but as a liability. Nigel Farage's recent hedging illustrates the shift. Where once there was enthusiasm, there is now qualification. Where once there was identification, there is distance. Such recalibration is rarely ideological. It is an election. Sovereignty cuts both ways. The sharpest criticism has come from Germany's Alternative for Germany, AfD, a party often caricatured as instinctively pro-Trump. Its leaders now warn that alignment with America first risks damaging German industry and subordinating national interests to American priorities. The language matters. European populists built their legitimacy on sovereignty. Supporting Washington's wars undermines that claim. Italy offers a similar story. Giorgia Meloni once positioned herself as a bridge between Trump's America and Europe's right. Yet even her coalition partners now reject participation in Hormuz patrols, insisting Italy is not at war with anyone. That formulation is telling. It defines national interest not through alliance solidarity, but through strategic autonomy. France's Marine Le Pen has moved more cautiously, criticizing American strikes elsewhere while avoiding direct confrontation over Iran. But caution itself signals distance. 10 years ago, such restraint would have been unthinkable. The Greenland moment, if the Iran war exposed strategic divergence, the Greenland episode exposed psychological rupture. Trump's suggestion that the United States might acquire Danish territory, backed by tariff threats, forced even sympathetic European leaders to confront an uncomfortable truth: Washington no longer treats Europe as a partner, but as terrain. For nationalist parties that prize territorial sovereignty primarily, this was intolerable. Even those inclined to tolerate American unilateralism abroad found it harder to accept closer to home. The message was unmistakable. America first includes Europe, NATO without consensus. The Hormuz dispute has also revealed the limits of NATO cohesion in the Trump era. European governments increasingly interpret the alliance as a defensive structure, not an expeditionary one. Requests to support Middle Eastern operations therefore encounter resistance even among traditionally Atlanticist states. When several major allies declined to deploy forces, Trump responded by criticizing NATO's reliability. Yet the refusal reflected not institutional weakness, but strategic disagreement over objectives and risk. An alliance can survive tension. It cannot survive divergence over what wars are for. The end of a transatlantic populist moment. None of this means Europe's far right is abandoning Trump entirely. Ideological sympathy remains strong on migration, identity politics, and institutional reform. Nor does it mean transatlantic cooperation among nationalist movements will disappear, but the relationship is changing shape. Where once Trump appeared as a patron, he now looks increasingly like a partner of convenience. Where once Europe's populists imagined alignment, they now emphasize autonomy. And where once America first sounded like a slogan they could share, it now sounds like a warning they must hedge against. This shift reveals a deeper truth about populist geopolitics. Nationalism travels poorly. Movements built on sovereignty rarely accept hierarchy, even when the hierarchy speaks their language. For years, analysts talked about a rising transatlantic populist alliance, but alliances built on nationalism rarely last. Eventually, someone's nation comes first. Today, Europe is making its choice, not against America, not even against Trump, but for itself. And that may be the most important shift in Western politics now underway.